Hi students, this is Miss Witt. Sorry about the late video. Your assignment on the right was to do some matching for your vocabulary. You need to remember that the mode would be, it would have words that would say something like the most. It would also have words that might say frequent. Okay, those are words that go with the word mode. Let's talk about the word median. What goes with the word median? If you look at the word median, it has an M, it has an I, and it has a D. So when we put those together, it spells mid. Another word, that's an abbreviation for middle. So if it may be the number that you see in the middle, but there's a golden rule. You should always put your numbers in order from least to greatest or greatest to least. So that is the median. Let's talk about the mean. The mean is Mr. Meany. Another word for mean that you might see often is the word average. It's the average of a set of numbers. And how do we find the average? We must first add. So when we draw Mr. Meany, we make plus symbols for his eyes. Then we must count all the numbers that we added. Sorry, so the C is his nose. And then we take the sum and we divide it by the count. So that's how we get his mouth. So you need to go in this order. So that's why we draw that arrow going down. Now that's the mean. And now let's talk about the measure of center. The measure of center is usually the mode. It's represented with the median, and it can be represented with the mean. Okay. Balance point. I see that word point. I also see the word points in that definition. So they probably have some way that they're going to go together. Okay, let's take a look at the practice now. The practice, they ask you to find the mode, which we just discussed that. That's the number that you see repeated the most. And they ask you for the median, which is the MID, which stands for mid or middle. So we're going to be doing both of those with all of these numbers. So if I'm looking at A, the first thing I probably want to do is rewrite my numbers in order from least to greatest. So I go across and I see where the lowest number looks like to me is in the 50s. So I see a 58. So I would list 58, and you notice I cross it off. And then I'm looking for any more 50s, which I do not see any more 50s, so now I'm going to go to 60s. What's my lowest 60? I have a 60. I don't see any more 60s. I have a 61. I have a 62. Do I see a 63? Nope. I do see a 64. And we talked about this in one of my classes, how they like to trick us and put another number down here that you might miss, because you might think, oh, there's already another 64. But you still need to represent that second 64. And then I'm looking across and I see a 65. I see a 66. I see a 67. Another 67. I see a 68. Another 68. And last, I see a 72. So something else I like to do before I start doing anything is I like to make sure I've got all my numbers, so I might count them. And I might say, okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 numbers. I should have 13 numbers in my list. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I got all my numbers. Now I'm going to start with the numbers that I see repeated the most. So I'm scanning across and I see I have 2 64s, I have 2 67s, and I have 2 68s. You are allowed to have more than one mode. Now, they're all equal to each other. They both have 2 of each of those. The frequency is 2 for those numbers. So for A, the mode is going to be 64, 67, and 68. Now, if for some reason they had an additional 64, then the mode would just be 64 because he occurred the most frequent. Even though we had two 67s and two 68s, 64 would be the mode because it was the most if I added another 64. Now I've got to find the median, the middle number. To find the median, you have to put your numbers in order, which we already did, and then you got to find the number in the middle. So I like to do little dashes that kind of like, especially when I have such a long list like this, sometimes I like to make the arch like this, but that's going to be a lot of arches. So I only do that when I have like a little bit of numbers, like a short data set. So I'm just going to cross them out from front and back. So I'm going to say one front, one back, one front, one back, front, back, front, back, front, back, front, and back. And I'm lucky because I only have one middle number, so it would be 65. Remember, if you have two middle numbers, then you kind of treat it like the warm-up we had in class. And if you have two middle numbers, then you add the two numbers together, kind of like your warm-up. So it might be A plus B, and then you divide by 2 because your count would have been two numbers. And so that's if you have two numbers in the middle. Okay, so B and C are exactly the same, okay? Just don't worry. If you have decimals, you treat it the same. You just make sure you line up your decimals when you add them, and then you know how to do it if you divide with the decimal. It just comes straight up. So let's take a look at, I'm going to erase this. Let's take a look at the second part. And this one, again, you have to determine the mode in these numbers, the one they see repeated the most for each of those people's names. So you would say, like we kind of did in our practice in our class, you're going to have Julian, you're going to have Mona, and then you're going to have Timmy. And you're going to want to list those numbers probably in order from least to greatest, because it looks like in part B, you're going to have to find the median, which if you're finding the median, whoops, it's not letting me scroll. See, I see B is I'm going to have to find the median, so they're going to have to be in order from least to greatest anyway. So I might as well go ahead and put them in order right now, which actually this one's in order already, so we're good. And Mona's in order. And Timmy's in order. They were nice. They already put them in order for you. So you have to do the mean and the mode and the median on those. Set some numbers. And then on the second page, remember I told you did not have to do C and you did not have to do D, but you have to do E, which now you have to find the mean of each of those people. So this is where it's going to take a little bit of work. That's why I told you didn't have to do C and D. So if you go back to the original problem, you have Julian, which was 3, 9, 9, 9, 10. So Julian, I'd have to do 3 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 10. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to add my numbers. Let me just double check I got the right numbers. 3, yep. So I put it together, and I know 9 times 3 is 27, and then 27 plus 3 is 30, and 30 plus 10 is 40. So I know I get 40 when I add. Now I need to count. How many numbers did I add? I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my count is 5, and now I divide my two numbers. What's 40 divided by 5, which is 8. So the mean for, is it Julian? Yep, the mean for Julian is 8. But you have to do the other two people just like you did this one. Exactly the same. So it's going to take a little bit more work. F, it says, who would you say did best on the quizzes? Well, that would be who had the highest average. So you're looking for the highest mean out of those three people, which I just did Julian for you. You have to do Timmy and, who was the other person? And Mona. Okay, so you did not have to do 3 and 4 because I was trying to save you some time. If you know how to solve it, then you should only have to do it a few times. You did not have to do the stretch. Okay, now let's take a look at the review. Remember on here, what is the shape of the distribution? You have 3 choices. It could be skewed. That means going in a certain direction, skewed left. It could be skewed right, meaning going down to go to the highest point. And is it going from the highest point down to the left? Then it's skewed left. If it's going from the highest point down to the right, then it's skewed right. Or it might be symmetrical, which means if it's symmetrical, it looks like a mountain. Okay, so if I'm looking here, the highest point is up here and it's going down that way. So you got to decide if it's skewed left, skewed right, or symmetrical. And I look here, and the highest point is right there, and it looks like it's going down in both directions. So which one of the 3 would it be for that one? For A, you have to write an equation to represent this graph, and I said you're going to need X, you need Y, and you would need 40. Well, I know that this is supposed to be the X-axis, and this is the Y. And I know where the X and the Y meet is right at the 40. Okay, so maybe it would be, you could say 40 divided by X equals Y. Okay, maybe we could try that. So if I plug in 120 instead of 40, divided by X equals Y, what would be the X? So if I go across 120 right here, what would the X be? Tells you right there. And what would the Y be? Tells you right there. So you could fill in your X and your Y with that. And the miles, remember, looks like to me like it's the Y. So whatever you get for a Y would be your answer for B. 3, remember, you have to do what's in the parentheses. You got to remember PEMDAS, parentheses, first, then your exponents. Remember, with exponents, if I have 4 to the 3rd power, that is not equal to 12. This is your base. This is how many times you write the base. So it would be 4, 4, 4. Now what do I do with those bases? You are finding the product, so you're multiplying. So that would be 16, and then 16 times 4 would be 64. So that would equal 64. So in review, let's review one more time. The mode is the number that we're going to see repeated the most, or the most frequent. If I see the median, it's the number that we see in the middle. But we have to remember the golden rule by putting them in order from least to greatest. You have to put them in order. What is the mean? He's Mr. Meanie. He is technically the average. How do we find the average? We do Mr. Meanie by adding, counting, and then dividing those 2 numbers together. I call these my triple M's. And that's how we find the center of a set of data. Okay, so I hope this helps you. Have a good night, and I look forward to seeing who has all the right answers tomorrow. Good night.